Greetings, salutations, and welcome to SportsLook, the sports television program for the high plains of West Texas and eastern New Mexico. I'm your host, Doc Elder, and just like a Tim McGraw song, we are working on our next 50 years here at KNW, and we're going to do our bit at SportsLook to try and get things off to an awesome start here in 2025. We've got Kelsey Prince, the new head coach of cheer at Eastern. We've got Joseph Garcia. He's the head coach of esports. I'll finish up with an overtime, but as always, I'll start out with an Eastern recap. It was a really good weekend for Eastern New Mexico University Greyhound track and field in Lubbock last weekend. For the Greyhound ladies in particular, Janiah Johnson with the fifth best throw in school history on the shot put. Really good weekend for Greyhound baseball. They went to Kingsville. They came back with 3 victories and only 1 loss. Even better weekend for Greyhound softball. They were competing in a tournament in Los Lunas. They won 4 games, only lost 1. For the Greyhound men's and women's basketball teams, 1 up and 1 down last week. They both won 1-point contests at Midwestern State. The Greyhound ladies lost by 16 to Lubbock Christian. The Greyhound guys lost by 20. Well, that has been your Eastern recap, so we'll clear this out and we'll bring in our first guest, Kelsey Prince, right now. Welcome back to SportsLook, and what an honor to have as our first guest of 2025.
Wow.
Certainly the most famous person to come out of Portales High School in the last 40 or 50 years, Kelsey Prince. And Kelsey, welcome to SportsLook.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I'm excited.
Well, Kelsey, the reason we're having you on is because you have become a new coach at Eastern New Mexico University.
Yes, it's been a blessing, kind of thrown into the deep end, middle of a season, middle of a school year, but it's been super exciting. It's been something I've had on my radar for quite a while, and so I'm excited to be with the cheer team at ENMU.
Kelsey, let's talk about your experience with dance, because many people will know that you have a really cool dance studio in Portales.
Yes.
At what age did you start dancing?
I started dancing when I was 3 years old, and I started competing when I was, in my early preteens. And I did that throughout my teenage years. I danced here at Eastern, took as many dance classes as I could. I performed in productions, the musicals and whatnot. And then I danced on the Spirit Squad here at Eastern as well.
So who were the big influences on you? Was there somebody in your life that inspired you, or did you just all of a sudden when you heard music, you started dancing?
Well, I have to be honest, I guess. And my parents actually put me in dance originally because I was super clumsy. And so they thought it would fix it. And it just stuck. It became a passion, and I loved it. And there's been so many inspirational figures along the way. Lorianne Gibson being one of them, Paula Abdul, just their grit and their tenacity and the way that they work with other people and inspire other people. Needless to say, I can still be clumsy at times, but if the music is going, I'm good.
Well, people who grew up in Portales would know that you also have an affinity for another sport. You're also a really good golfer, and I can probably point to the person that was the big influence on you golfing.
Oh, 100%. It was my father, Kenny Prince, and he is a legendary golfer, I swear. He is so good. And my grandfather before him, HT. And I don't know if I'm that good at golf, but, sometimes I'd rather be lucky than good. I remember when you got a hole-in-one.
People remember that because, he got a hole-in-one.
I remember that because I was working the pro shop that day, and you had me come in and got a scorecard for it. It was awesome.
Well, as they say, even a blind hog finds an acorn once in a while. But Kelsey, let's talk about dance at Eastern New Mexico University. What was the process? How did you find out about the job, and what was your interview process like?
Well, my dance studio has performed half times and for the last few years at Eastern. And I think just my involvement with my dancers and the way that we show up, I'm just a vessel. It's all my kids, their hard work and their passion for it. But they show up and they show out. And my connection with the former coach Reagan, when she got engaged and realized that she was getting ready to move on to the next chapter of her life, she connected with me and wanted to make sure that she was turning it over to someone that, you know, had a passion for it as well, and the Greyhounds. So
I didn't realize that she had gotten engaged.
she did, and she's going
Wow.
off to Tennessee, as far as I know.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well, we
yeah.
wish her the best. Of course,
Yeah.
she came from Carlsbad and came to Eastern and
Mm-hmm.
was part of the Spirit Squad and part of the cheer squad. So,
Yes.
so it's nice to know that there is some continuity there.
Yes, absolutely. And she did a great job with the program. And, you know, I think I've got, coming in middle semester was definitely different. I didn't want to completely flip the script, but I definitely had a different sort of standard and way of coaching, and everybody does. But I'm really proud of the hard work that this group of kids that I've got now have put in, and you'll get to see it on, you know, when you go to the basketball games, there's only a few left. You'll get to see the hard work that they put in. They've got a love for their sport, and they've got a love for their school and their teams, and they really show it when they're on the sidelines.
So, did you bring in some cheers that you thought that the young ladies would, and the guy, because you've got
Yes, we do have a boy.
we
Yeah,
have four
Cody.
girls
Yeah.
and one guy,
Yeah.
that would suit them, or was it just kind of like, okay, these are the cheers you're doing, and let's just work on the technique?
Yeah, a little bit of both, a little bit of give and take. They had a great foundation after, you know, spending so much time with Reagan, and we did kind of just enhance some of the things that they had been doing and just really drill the basics, really make them stronger. They're going to the gym consistently and all of that. And there is a little bit, since I have a dance background, some of the stunting they're getting to teach me a little bit. You know, a student becomes a teacher, and I'm really excited to be learning that avenue and that part of this world, you know, the performance and sideline and game day world that I've been exposed to, but maybe not necessarily been as involved in. But they work really hard. They do.
So, if you were to put together a wish list of things that you hoped every cheerleader that cheers for Eastern has, what's the most important? What's number one on the list that this is what a cheerleader, male or female, has to have?
As far as like skills and
Or
techniques?
it could be skills, it could be enthusiasm, it could be presence, whatever you think the most important quality is.
Well, I always say that hard work beats talent every day. And, you know, there's some people that are just blessed and naturally have it. But there's people that are going to show up and they're going to be dedicated and they're going to work hard and they're going to be focused and driven. And I would say that that's what anyone who comes and cheers for Eastern needs. They need to have that dedication to the team, because sometimes we do the best we can with what we got. And that's pretty common in Portales anyway. But just having a love for the sport, a love for the school, a sense of pride, and sense of self is really important.
There are a couple of places that cheerleaders could cheer from. They could cheer from kind of the oval part of the horseshoe, or you could cheer from the baseline right next to the student. If you had your druthers, where do you think cheerleaders should be?
In the arena? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Well, and that's one big change you'll see at the games is I have shifted my team over. And I prefer it over there because we're not limited by the clock on media timeout. So if we're doing a stunt, if we're in the middle of a cheer, if we're tumbling, we're not rushing off the court. The other reason is they have more flexibility in their crowd interaction because they can turn towards the students and they can still interact with the alumni. And sometimes the alumni, they're the ones that are dedicated. They're the ones that really get into it and get involved with us. I know the students do too, but I think that as far as crowd interaction, I really enjoy having them over there. Just more room for everything and room for growth, I think, over there instead of on the sideline.
Yeah, I obviously, because I do the broadcasts of all home games, I saw, okay, they're not on the baseline anymore, they're over there.
I know.
I didn't know if that was something that, like, the athletic department had suggested, or if this
No,
was
that
your
was
idea?
my idea, and
Yeah.
it did take them a little bit of adjusting, but I think after they realized the benefit of it and just not being limited by those clocks on timeouts and being right by the band and being able to see more faces in the crowd instead of just looking at the court, I think they enjoy it. It's very resembling of what football games are like for them, where they turn and cheer and then watch the game. And so I think they've had fun with it.
This is a question that I don't know if you've ever been asked in connection with being the coach, but in terms of the uniforms that your young ladies and your guy wear, are they provided by the school, or do they have to fundraise for themselves?
A lot of our budget, in fact, the majority of it is from fundraising. And that has been something that's been a struggle even when I was on the Spirit Squad. So we do have a few fundraisers coming up, one of them being our cheer camp on the 22nd of this month. And then the girls are going to do like little crush Valentines, like telegrams for Valentine's Day. So we have a few fundraisers to try to, rebuild that budget looking ahead. But yeah, and then now the school's partnered with Adidas. And so it is challenging to find that funding for them. But
Well, if people do want to donate and participate, is there like a website they can go to find out how to participate in fundraising for you?
sure, ENMU Athletics, you can reach out to Callie at the main office or just reach out to me. My cell phone number is on my dance studio website, and maybe just make out a check and on the byline make sure it says cheer team, and we'd be so grateful for that. Absolutely. Looking ahead and hoping we can grow and double, triple in size next year. That's going to be something we consider because these kids also don't, that's the same budget that our kids' scholarships come from. And they go to every single game. They show up and they show out the entire time. They practice at 6 a.m. They go to workouts just like any other sport. But to be able to provide them scholarships so that not only are they fulfilled with the work that they're doing, but that there's a little bit of payback for them, those dividends don't always match up.
So you touched on something. You talked about how you hope to at least double, maybe even triple the squad. What's the ideal number for basketball? What's the ideal number for football?
Anytime there's a cheer team, 15 to 20 minimum. If you want to consider having stunts, one stunt group could need from 3 to 4 just on the base, include the flyer. So the more you have, the more stunt groups are available. And sometimes people aren't stunters. Maybe they tumble. Maybe they aren't necessarily tumblers or stunt, but they can jump or do sign work. And that is also kind of where my worlds mesh with dance and cheer. And there's times where I'm like, is this a little too dancey? But being able to involve that choreography element in there too just adds another level of dimension that is super exciting for the crowd.
Well, speaking of which, a number of people in the viewing audience may already know this, but speaking of choreographing, you choreographed an amazing first dance for my lovely wife, Jan, and me.
You made me so proud. I'm so excited. That was such a great experience to be able to do that, and such an honor and a privilege. And I know you guys just had the most beautiful and blessed day ever.
Well, you were a big part of that. Kelsey, congratulations on getting the job as the cheer coach, and look forward to seeing your young ladies and guy in action.
Thank you so much.
All right, well, that is going to wrap up our first interview segment, so we'll clear the set and we'll bring in the head coach of esports right now. Welcome back to SportsLook, and a privilege to bring back to the set of SportsLook the head coach of esports at Eastern New Mexico University, Joseph Garcia. And Joseph, welcome back to SportsLook.
Thanks for having me again.
It's pretty cool. My first guest was Kelsey Prince, who grew up in Portales, New Mexico. Mm-hmm. You grew up in Portales, New Mexico, and I think that really speaks favorably to the fact that if you get involved in anything in Portales, you've got a good supports network.
Yeah, it seems like, yeah.
So talk a little bit about, for people that may never have seen the other episodes that you've appeared on, what is your association with esports?
So obviously I'm the head coach here for Eastern. I grew up competing in video games, esports. I did the club here whenever I was in college. And yeah, I mean, it's just what I'm passionate about, I like to do. And I spent my time after I graduated, I started doing a little bit of coaching for high school, and then I ended up here at Eastern. I've spent the past 2.5 years now coaching here.
So what was the video game that got you hooked originally, and what's your favorite video game now?
I think the game that got me into competing was Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. That's like the game that got me competing. But just like playing games in general was probably just like Pokemon, games like that, whenever I was a kid. But yeah.
And for people that are in our viewing audience that may not have any familiarity with video games, there are basically two types of games. There's one where it's just you competing against the video system, but there are also games like you referred to that you compete against other people. And what's the advantage of one over the other?
I'd say that, single player games you can kind of play by yourself. I mean, they're nice because, they're just kind of like relaxing, right? You can just kind of play them at your own pace, and, there's like a story element to it usually in those games, right? But whenever you play competitive games, it's just like, you can imagine just like any other kind of competitive, endeavor, right? Like it kind of draws something out from you that you have to be able to do, right? Competing against other people, developing skills, just like not just like playing the game, but also like mentally, being able to like strategize and handle pressure and stuff. Especially whenever you're competing for something like collegiate, like leagues or like state titles, or even just tournaments in general and prize money, right? There's definitely that kind of edge to it too.
Let's talk a little bit, even though we're going to spend most of the time talking about the competitive games, because that's obviously what esports is about. But if you had to pick out a video game that really has an interesting quest element to it that you play as an individual, what game would you recommend?
That's a good question. There's a lot of really good games. I'd say probably one of the deepest games I think you could play is definitely any of the Final Fantasy games. Those games have really in-depth stories.
It's interesting because my younger son, Ryan, was an avid gamer, and he loved Final Fantasy. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about esports as a sport. Who was the athletic director that said, we need to go from being a club to actually having this as a regular sport?
So previous athletic director, Dr. Weir, was one who started kind of like, started up and took esports on under athletics. So it was him that did that.
And he obviously has given way to a new athletic director. Kevin Veit is now at Eastern New Mexico University. And you were telling me before we actually went on the air that while you do have interaction with Kevin, you actually have much more contact with another person in athletics.
Yes, yeah. Usually, if I have any questions, I go to Mike Molina. He's kind of my go-to guy that I just go and visit. Sometimes I've talked to Dr. Veit before. We've talked together, had meetings and stuff, other things we need to talk about. But mostly, if I can talk to Mike first and say, okay, well, he has the answers, or if it's like, hey, we should talk about it together, then we'll have a meeting like that.
So does Kevin Veit set goals for you, or is just like you know what you're doing and keep doing what you're doing?
Mostly it's just keep doing what I'm doing. Just keeping the teams running and all that.
Well, I remember I had you as a guest when the program was brand new, and we only had, I think, like 5 players, and we only played one game. You were telling me it's a little bit bigger now.
Yes, yeah. So now we have about 18, 19 students in the program, and that's about 5 different games we're competing right now.
Okay, so I would imagine that Super Smash Brothers is one of them, but
Yes.
What are the other 4?
So we have League of Legends, which is one we didn't have before the past 2 years, so it's the one we added. We have Valorant and Overwatch again, and then then we have Smash Bros. So that's 4, and then the last one we have is the Fortnite team.
And what was the process of adding the new game? Was it you thinking, hey, this would be good to add, or did you have students that said, we'd like to compete in this?
Yeah, it was the students that have interest in playing. If we have enough students for a team, then then we can play.
And let's talk a little bit about the composition of your squad. I remember you telling me that at one point in time it was kind of interesting that we had kind of a high number of music majors that were competing given the composition of the student body. So if you had to look at those 18 or 19 kids that are on your squad, what major is the most common?
I would say still
music.
Yeah, still music. Yeah, I think most of them are still music majors, and I know that because I have to kind of juggle around between their concerts and practices and stuff still. So,
and we talked a little bit about it, but now that you've had a couple of years to think about the correlation, is there a correlation, or is it just for some reason music majors have come into your program, or is there a correlation between the way you've got to think?
I've thought about that, and I think, obviously, like a lot of people are drawn to different things, but I've noticed, sometimes like, I think the only biggest correlation I've made is that introverts like video games, and introverts are also kind of like, drawn towards like band, right? So it's maybe just like kind of, that's the correlation I've made. Maybe there's a different one, but that's what I think. It's just kind of like more, like kind of reserved, kind of like maybe kind of like nerdy kinds of kids, or kind of, like those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, for every person that's a guitar hero, virtuoso, there are a lot more musicians that are just, they're into themselves, kind of Billie Eilish type, as I would think. In terms of the age range, is this something that appeals more to kids as they're entering college, more as they're upperclassmen, or is it a mixture?
I think it's just kind of a mixture. I mean, like I said, like I also coach at the high school, and we have, obviously we have a lot of high school kids playing esports for their school, and they also recently added to junior high here too. So the junior high kids in the state are playing, and that program also has a lot of kids. So it's like probably like anywhere between age like 12, 11 to like 20 something. It's like you can find a lot of esports kids.
Let's talk about the season that's coming up. What does the season look like for esports at Eastern?
So we start our season this week. Our first match is actually tonight at 6:45, and then we have another match tomorrow. So the first match today is League of Legends, and the next match tomorrow is Overwatch, and then we'll play our season until about halfway through March.
Man, so we are catching you at exactly the right time.
Yes.
So going into a match, what is the best coaching advice? Is it technique, or is it mental approach, or a combination of both?
It's definitely a bit of both. I mean, usually by the time you're in a game, technical stuff, you're at where you're at. You can't really like teach you there. It's a lot, in the moment, it's just about the strategy, I think.
I was laughing at myself because that was it's not like you could teach a kid how to throw a curveball right before he pitches the line. So it's kind of hard to, up, down, 80 or something like that at the last minute. So how much do you learn from the kids as opposed to how much they learn from you?
I definitely learn a lot from them, especially like from the games that I don't play. Because like of those 5 games, some of them I only played 3 of the 5, and the other 2 I don't really know the way. Like they're definitely way better than me at those games. So I'm like learning, watching them play and whatnot. But even on the other games that I do know, like sometimes they'll do things I'm like, that's interesting. Like okay, that's something new I've seen. So it's cool.
That was the way it was for me coaching, that for every one thing I taught kids, I probably learned 3 or 4 things. For some sports at Eastern, there's a conference structure, and you try to win conference, and you try and advance into the postseason. For other sports, like in rodeo, it's just like whether you're a junior college in the Southwest region or you're Texas Tech or you're somewhere in between like we are, you're all competing against each other equally. So
Yes.
what is the type of, are there specific leagues or is this just like a Southwest region?
So the way we entered, so through the NASTAR league that we entered, it's broken into 3 different, conferences. It's East, West, and then mixed.
Okay.
And then, but in those, you play against all divisions, D1, D2, D3, it's all of them. So you're put in the conference, and we're in the mixed conference. So we kind of play both East and West schools, probably because we're kind of in the center of the country, right? So we can play either of those, and then, yeah, it's just broken into 3 based on just like where you are.
And without putting you on the spot too much in the 60 seconds we've got left, but if you had to kind of make a prediction right now, what team do you really expect the best results from?
That's a tough question. I think that they all have good potential this year. I'd say based on how things went last year, our Valorant team is looking really good, because they almost made playoffs last year, and they're just like 1 game away from it. And this year, I think definitely can make it this year. But the other teams, they definitely have a chance to. Like they're looking good too. So I have high hopes.
Well, let us hope this is the year we have that breakthrough with at least 1 squad and hopefully more.
Sounds good.
Well, Joseph, thanks for being our guest, and best of luck this year.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, well, that is going to wrap up the interview portion of Sports Look. So what we'll do is we'll clear this out, and I'll finish up with an overtime right now. After we finished up the fall semester, there was a pretty nice ceremony that took place in Albuquerque where there were 6 individuals that were introduced as the newest people to go into the New Mexico Sports Hall of Fame. And of those 6 individuals, 2 of them graduates of Eastern New Mexico University, Steve Loy, who of course went on to have a great career as a golf coach, and Mike Sinclair, who played 11 years of pro football, 4 times a Pro Bowler, was one of the defensive players of the year for the Seattle Seahawks. So Eastern representing at that particular event. Well, that will wrap up in overtime, and that will wrap up our first episode of Sports Look. I'd like to thank my guests, Kelsey Prince and Joseph Garcia. Had a veteran floor crew, mostly, including the guy who was my director, Mr. Kyle. So for all of those aforementioned people, this is Doc Elder saying, so long.